It was supposed to be Captain Hayes' retirement flight, a peaceful journey across the Atlantic with his beloved companion Rex making his final trip in the cockpit. After 35 years of flying and 8 years of having Rex as his emotional support, Hayes was ready to land for the last time. But when crisis struck at 35,000 feet, this farewell flight became a fight for survival that would test the extraordinary bond between pilot and his four-legged co-pilot. The early morning sun cast long shadows across the tarmac at John F. Kennedy International Airport as Captain Robert Hayes completed his pre-flight inspection of the Airbus A330. At 62 years old, with silver hair and laugh lines that spoke of decades spent reassuring nervous passengers, Hayes was conducting his final walk-around as a commercial airline pilot. After 35 years, over 20,000 flight hours, and more than 2 million miles in the air, today would mark the end of an extraordinary career that had taken him to every continent and through every type of weather imaginable. But Hayes wasn't alone in this milestone moment. Sitting patiently beside the aircraft's boarding stairs was Rex, a magnificent golden retriever whose calm brown eyes had witnessed almost as many takeoffs and landings as his human companion. For 8 years, Rex had been Hayes' emotional support animal, approved by the airline and beloved by crew members who had watched the remarkable partnership develop between pilot and dog. Rex's presence in the cockpit wasn't just about companionship, it was about survival. Hayes had been diagnosed with severe PTSD following a near-catastrophic emergency landing in 2016, when hydraulic failure had nearly caused him to lose an aircraft full of passengers over the Pacific Ocean. The trauma had triggered panic attacks that threatened to end his career, until Rex had entered his life through a specialized program that paired veterans and first responders with trained emotional support animals. The Golden Retriever had been specifically trained to recognize the early signs of Hayes' anxiety attacks, providing deep pressure therapy and grounding techniques that allowed the experienced pilot to continue flying safely. Rex's calm presence had helped Hayes work through his trauma while maintaining his status as one of the airline's most respected captains. Their partnership had become legendary among airline personnel, with Rex even earning his own crew ID badge and regular safety briefings. Today's flight, Transatlantic Flight 447 from New York to London Heathrow, was scheduled to be routine, a 7-hour journey across the Atlantic with 298 passengers and 12 crew members aboard. The passenger manifest included business travelers heading to European meetings, families beginning vacation adventures, and elderly couples fulfilling lifelong dreams of visiting England. None of them knew that their pilot was flying his last commercial flight, or that the Golden Retriever they might glimpse in the boarding area would soon become the most important crew member on the aircraft. First Officer Sarah Chen, a rising star in the company with over 5,000 flight hours, had specifically requested to be Hayes' co-pilot for this historic flight. At 34, she represented the new generation of aviators, but she had enormous respect for Hayes' experience and the wisdom he had gained through decades of flying. She had also developed a special fondness for Rex, who had become an unofficial mascot for their regular crew. "Ready for the big goodbye, Captain?" Chen asked as she approached Hayes and Rex near the aircraft. She knelt down to scratch behind Rex's ears, receiving the dog's characteristic gentle tail wag in response. Hayes smiled, though his expression carried the weight of mixed emotions. As ready as anyone can be to end a 35-year love affair with flying. Rex here seems to know something's different today. He's been more attentive than usual. Rex indeed appeared to be in an especially alert state, his ears perked forward and his attention focused on both his human companions and the aircraft itself. His behavior wasn't anxious, rather it was the heightened awareness of a working animal who sensed that today required his full attention. The boarding process proceeded smoothly, with passengers settling into their seats for the transatlantic journey. Hayes and Chen completed their extensive pre-flight checks, reviewing weather conditions, fuel calculations, and system status reports. The Airbus A330 was performing perfectly, with all systems showing green across the board. Weather reports indicated clear skies for the majority of the route, with only minor turbulence expected over the mid-Atlantic. As the aircraft pushed back from the gate, at 10:15 a.m. Eastern Time, Hayes felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that had accompanied every takeoff throughout his career. Rex settled in his usual position on a specially designed bed behind the pilot's seat, watched attentively as the pre-takeoff procedures unfolded. The dog had witnessed this routine thousands of times, but his eyes tracked every movement with professional interest. "Transatlantic 447, you are cleared for takeoff on runway 4L," came the crisp voice of air traffic control through Hayes' headset. "Transatlantic 447 cleared for takeoff, runway 4L," Hayes responded, advancing the throttles as the massive aircraft began its acceleration down the runway. Rex felt the familiar sensation of increasing speed, and the moment when the aircraft lifted off the ground, transitioning from earthbound machine to airborne miracle. His ears popped slightly as the cabin pressure adjusted, but he remained calm and alert, his training having long ago accustomed him to the sensory experience of flight. The initial climb proceeded normally, with Hayes and Chen working through their post-takeoff checklists as the aircraft ascended through 10,000 feet. then 20,000, finally leveling off at their cruising altitude of 37,000 feet. The Atlantic Ocean stretched endlessly beneath them, a deep blue expanse dotted with the occasional ship appearing as a tiny white speck on the vast surface. For the first 3 hours of the flight, everything proceeded exactly as planned. Passengers settled into their long-haul routines, some sleeping, others watching movies or reading books, children coloring or playing games. The cabin crew served lunch and began their mid-flight service, moving efficiently through the aisles. With drinks and snacks dot in the cockpit, Hayes and Chen monitored their progress across the Atlantic, communicating periodically with air traffic control centers in New York, Gander, and eventually Shannon as they crossed through different airspace zones. Rex dozed intermittently but remained attuned to the subtle changes in engine sound, air pressure, and the general atmosphere of the aircraft. It was at 1:47 p.m. GMT, approximately 200 miles west of Ireland, when the first indication of trouble appeared on the flight deck. A subtle vibration, barely perceptible at first, began emanating from the port engine. Hayes noticed it immediately. After 35 years of flying, he could detect even the slightest variation in an aircraft's normal operating characteristics. "Sarah, are you feeling that vibration from number 1? Hayes asked, his voice calm but alert. Chen checked her instruments and nodded. "Confirmed. Engine parameters still look normal, but there's definitely something not right with the feel." Rex's head came up immediately, his ears forward and his body tense with attention. The dog had sensed the change in the aircraft's vibration pattern before the pilots had even discussed it, his sensitive hearing picking up frequencies that human ears couldn't detect. Hayes began the standard procedures for monitoring an engine anomaly, but the situation deteriorated rapidly. Within minutes, the vibration had intensified significantly, and engine parameters began showing irregular readings. Oil pressure was fluctuating, and the engine temperature was climbing above normal operating limits. "Transatlantic 447, this is Shannon Control. We show you approximately 200 miles west of our airspace. Please report your status," came the Irish air traffic controller's voice. "Shannon Control. Transatlantic 447, we're experiencing engine problems with our port engine and may need to declare an emergency. Requesting vectors to the nearest suitable airport," Hayes responded, his voice betraying none of the concern he was feeling. But the engine problem was only the beginning. As Hayes and Chen worked through emergency checklists, trying to diagnose and contain the mechanical issue, Rex began exhibiting behavior that neither pilot had seen before. The dog stood up from his bed and moved toward the cockpit door, whining softly and pawing at the barrier that separated the flight deck from the passenger cabin. "Rex, what's wrong, boy?" Hayes asked, momentarily distracted from the engine emergency by his companion's unusual behavior. Rex's response was to increase his agitation, moving back and forth between the cockpit door and Hayes' seat, clearly trying to communicate something urgent that his human companions weren't understanding. It was then that Hayes realized Rex wasn't just responding to the engine problem, he was detecting something else entirely. The dog's training included medical alert capabilities, and his behavior suggested that he was sensing a medical emergency somewhere on the aircraft. "Sarah, I think Rex is picking up on a medical situation with one of the passengers. Can you contact the lead flight attendant and ask if anyone is experiencing medical distress?" Chen immediately contacted the cabin crew, and the response confirmed Hayes' suspicion. In row 23, a 67-year-old passenger named William Morales was experiencing severe chest pain and shortness of breath, classic symptoms of a heart attack. The cabin crew was already providing oxygen and attempting to make the passenger comfortable, but Morrison's condition was rapidly deteriorating. Now Hayes faced the nightmare scenario that every pilot dreads: multiple simultaneous emergencies. The port engine was continuing to malfunction, requiring careful monitoring and potentially an engine shutdown. A passenger was having a light medical emergency that required immediate landing at the nearest airport with advanced medical facilities, and they were in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, far from any runway. Rex seemed to understand the gravity of the situation better than anyone else on the aircraft. The dog positioned himself directly between Hayes and Chen, his body pressed against Hayes' leg in the deep pressure contact that was part of his PTSD support training. But his eyes remained fixed on the cockpit instruments, as if he were monitoring the situation alongside the human crew. "Shannon Control, Transatlantic 447 declaring a medical emergency. We have a passenger experiencing cardiac arrest and require immediate diversion to the nearest airport with medical facilities." Hayes transmitted. "Transatlantic 447, Shannon Control, understand medical emergency. We can vector you to Cork Airport, APPROXIMATELY, 180 miles east of your position. Are you able to maintain current altitude?" Hayes hesitated before responding. The engine situation was becoming more critical, with increasing vibration and continued parameter deterioration. shan control, negative on maintaining altitude, were also experiencing severe engine problems and may need to initiate emergency descent. What happened next would later be described by accident investigators as one of the most remarkable examples of crew resource management in aviation history. But what they couldn't quantify in their reports was the role that Rex played in keeping Hayes focused and calm during the most critical phase of the emergency. As the engine problem worsened, requiring Hayes to shut down the port engine entirely, Rex positioned himself so that his body was in constant contact with the pilot. The dog's trained response to Hayes' rising stress levels helped prevent the panic attack that could have incapacitated the captain during the most crucial moment of the flight. With only one engine operating, the Airbus A330 was still capable of flight, but the aircraft's performance was significantly degraded. Hayes had to carefully manage the remaining engine power, adjust for the asymmetric thrust, and plan a descent profile that would get them to Cork Airport before either the mechanical situation or the medical emergency became fatal. Rex's behavior during this phase was extraordinary. The dog seemed to anticipate Hayes' needs, providing pressure contact when stress levels rose, and remaining calm and steady when the aircraft experienced severe turbulence during the single-engine descent. But most remarkably, Rex appeared to be monitoring the aircraft's systems alongside the crew, his head turning toward instruments that showed changing parameters. First Officer Chen later testified that Rex seemed to know when critical decisions needed to be made. During the most challenging phase of the approach to Cork Airport, when Hayes was struggling with the asymmetric handling characteristics of the damaged aircraft, Rex moved to a position where he could maintain contact with both pilots, providing emotional support to the entire crew. The approach to Cork Airport was complicated by strong crosswinds and the aircraft's degraded performance, but Hayes drew upon every bit of his 35 years of experience to manage the challenging landing. Rex remained pressed against his leg throughout the approach, his steady presence helping. Hayes maintained the focus and fine motor control necessary for the precision required. When the aircraft touched down safely on Cork's runway at 3:23 p.m. the emergency response was immediate and comprehensive. Medical personnel boarded the aircraft within minutes to treat William Morrison, whose life was saved by the rapid diversion and the advanced cardiac care available at Cork University Hospital. Fire and rescue teams inspected the damaged engine, confirming that Hayes' decision to shut it down had prevented a catastrophic failure that could have resulted in the loss of the aircraft. But in all the post-incident interviews and investigations that followed, what struck everyone most was the role that Rex had played in the successful outcome. The dog had detected the medical emergency before the cabin crew was aware of it, providing the early warning that made the rapid response possible. More importantly, Rex's presence had enabled Hayes to function effectively during the most stressful situation of his flying career. The passengers, initially confused and frightened by the unscheduled landing, became emotionally moved when they learned the full story of what had transpired in the cockpit. Many requested to meet Rex personally, wanting to thank the dog whose alertness had contributed to saving not just Morrison's life, but potentially all of their lives if the engine situation had continued to deteriorate. William Morrison made a full recovery after emergency surgery at Cork University Hospital. When he was well enough to travel, he specifically requested to meet Hayes and Rex, wanting to express his gratitude to both the pilot and the dog who had played such crucial roles in his survival. "I don't remember much about the heart attack," Morrison said during their meeting at the hospital. "But I've been told that your dog somehow knew I was in trouble before anyone else did." In my book that makes Rex as much of a hero as Captain Hayes, the aviation authorities' investigation of the incident revealed that the engine failure had been caused by a manufacturing defect that could not have been predicted or prevented through normal maintenance procedures. Hayes' handling of the emergency was praised as exemplary, with investigators noting that his decision-making throughout the crisis had been flawless, despite the extreme pressure of the situation. But the official reports could only hint at the psychological factors that had enabled Hayes to perform so effectively. In the detailed debriefing sessions, Hayes credited Rex with providing the emotional stability that had prevented his PTSD from interfering with his professional performance during the emergency. "Without Rex, I honestly don't know if I could have handled that situation," Hayes admitted to the investigators. "The combination of mechanical failure and medical emergency was exactly the type of scenario that triggered my worst anxiety. Rex somehow knew that and provided exactly the support I needed, exactly when I needed it." The story of Flight 447's emergency landing became international news, with aviation experts marveling at the successful outcome of such a complex emergency scenario. But for Hayes, the most significant aspect of the incident was that it had occurred on what was supposed to be his final flight as a commercial pilot. The irony wasn't lost on him that his retirement flight had turned into one of the most challenging and ultimately rewarding experiences of his entire career. The successful handling of the emergency had demonstrated that his skills, experience, and partnership with Rex was still at their peak, making his retirement decision bittersweet. Rex, for his part, seemed to understand that their flying partnership had reached a natural conclusion. In the days following the incident, the dog showed no signs of stress or trauma from the emergency. Instead, he appeared content and satisfied, as if he knew that their final flight together had been a triumph that validated 8 years of training, trust, and mutual dependence. The airline offered Hayes the opportunity to extend his career, citing his exceptional performance during the emergency as evidence that he was far from ready for retirement. But Hayes declined, knowing that he and Rex had achieved something extraordinary together and that it was time to step aside for the next generation of aviators. 6 months after the incident, Hayes and Rex were honored at the International Aviation Safety Awards ceremony, where they received recognition for their contribution to aviation safety and the successful outcome of Flight 447's emergency. Rex, wearing a specially designed ceremonial collar, sat calmly beside Hayes as they accepted the award, his presence a testament to the remarkable partnership that had developed between human and animal. The ceremony included a presentation about the role of emotional support animals in high-stress professions, with Flight 447 serving as a case study for how properly trained animals could enhance human performance during critical situations. Rex had become not just an individual hero, but a symbol of the potential for human-animal partnerships in professional settings. Today, Hayes and Rex live quietly in a small coastal town in Maine, where the former pilot has taken up teaching at a local flight training school. Rex accompanies him to classes, where student pilots learn not just about aviation techniques and procedures, but about the importance of emotional resilience and the value of having a trusted partner during challenging situations. Their story has been incorporated into aviation training curricula around the world, with Flight 447 serving as an example of how multiple factors experience, training, emotional support, and even animal instinct can combine to create successful outcomes during emergencies. Rex has become something of a celebrity in aviation circles, though he seems most content when he's simply lying beside Hayes as the former captain shares his knowledge with the next generation of pilots. The bond between Hayes and Rex has only deepened since their retirement from active flying. They spend their days walking along the Maine coastline, with Hayes often reflecting on the extraordinary journey that brought them together and the remarkable final flight that tested everything they had learned about trust, survival, and the power of partnership. Sometimes, on clear days when aircraft pass overhead, Rex will look up and watch the contrails crossing the sky, his ears perked forward as if he's remembering the sensation of flight. Hayes likes to think that the dog understands they were part of something special, something that demonstrated the best of what's possible when humans and animals work together with complete trust and mutual respect. Their story reminds us all that heroism comes in many forms, and that sometimes the most extraordinary achievements result from the simplest relationships. The bond between a man and his dog, tested at 35,000 feet and proven stronger than any force that tried to break it. This incredible story shows us that true partnership knows no boundaries, not species, not altitude, and not the constraints of conventional thinking. Hayes and Rex proved that when trust runs deep enough, two different kinds of courage can combine to achieve the impossible. Sometimes the most sophisticated navigation system is a loyal heart that refuses to let you fly alone. Their final flight became a testament to the power of partnership and the extraordinary things that can happen when we trust in the bonds that make us stronger than we could ever be alone. What other incredible stories of courage, loyalty, and partnerships that defy the odds are waiting to be discovered? Subscribe for more emotional tales that will restore your faith in the connections that lift us all higher.